Both Travis and I will be taking notes as we go, so we're not ignoring you or checking our email. We're just giving you some feedback, which you'll get next week.
No problem.
Okay?
Thank you.
So my first question for you, Coleman, is what were you doing before Year Up? How did you hear about the program, and why did you decide to join?
Sure. So I was part of a two-man IT team supporting a restaurant. So we made sure all their point-of-sale systems worked, and majority of their credit cards went through. I specifically joined Year Up to join the cybersecurity track. I was convinced by one of the alumni that came here.
Which alum? Just curious.
Kyle Yaird.
Oh, okay, cool. I know him. Why do you want to work in the tech field?
I was always interested in technology, but I have never had what path to take. So I landed in IT after getting my A+ certification, but I always wanted to be in cybersecurity. Maybe because it was how it's portrayed in the movies, but that's something I always wanted to do.
What about the skill set of cybersecurity draws you to it?
I like how in order to penetration test something, you have to learn the ins and outs of it.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to break into software, you need to know the ins and outs, like the complexities to it. And you would also need to know the layers, security layers. So it may not be the software that's at risk. It could also be the human that uses the software. So it's always interesting to analyze what security threats there are. And plus, I feel like the title is really cool, too.
Great. What has been your biggest growth area or challenge during L&D, and what steps have you taken to overcome that?
The biggest challenge for me was probably grammar, specifically when to use commas. I asked Abby to send me some websites on when to use commas, and I personally watched some YouTube videos. But that is my weakness. I think my grade dropped because I just couldn't use commas effectively. And some semicolons.
Referring to the internship description, can you explain what makes you a strong candidate for this technical role?
So like I said before, I had IT experience, and I feel like since I have the IT experience, there's a lot of communication that's involved with IT, especially in help desk. So I feel like I gained the skills necessary to communicate with a wide range of people. Some experience is speaking to non-proficient English speakers. So a lot of people who worked at the restaurant weren't native English speakers. They're actually Spanish speakers. So I found myself using Google Translator to say some phrases in Spanish, which helped a lot.
Great. Describe for me a conflict that you experienced in the workplace, and how did you handle it?
A conflict I usually had was picking the right route to travel to the restaurant. So when we couldn't solve the issues remotely, me and my boss would have to travel on site. And we always had this little tiny argument on which route to take, which is usually settled on just by using Google Maps, seeing which route is the shortest, but we just like to guess which route's the fastest. And usually the solution is just to use Waze or Google Maps. But that's our little conflict that we had, just guessing which route to go.
Can you tell me about a time that you had to complete a really large quantity of work in a really short amount of time? And how did you ensure that you both met the deadline and delivered a really good product?
So in my previous job, I was on a 24/7 on-call. So whenever someone had technical issues, I would have to respond to the issues immediately. But I had a hard time when I first started following up with the issue and documenting it. So I devised a little ticketing system for myself where I would take notes on my phone, log the incident, and I'm able to follow up with it later, because after a while you start noticing the patterns that arrive, and it could be a human issue or a software issue. So having those notes there help you analyze the issue and troubleshoot it faster. The company didn't have a ticketing system, so just had to find something to do it on my own.
If you could do anything different in that scenario or situation, what would you have done?
I would probably suggest the company to have a ticketing system, which would help in the long run. So having like a centralized database for all the technical issues. So in the future, maybe they could make certain decisions differently because they just have more data.
Imagine that you are completing a technical project with a group of 4 people, so you are one of the 4. What role do you imagine you would naturally take on?
Maybe a leader that leads from behind. I don't really, maybe by showing example, I don't see myself ordering people all around, but I would probably be the one that organizes everything. I won't necessarily direct people right away. I would observe how they work first and then give directions. So I would probably be an observer than a leader. But if I have to step in, I'll give directions.
So referring to that, could you tell me about a time that you were in a leadership position, either formally or informally, and faced a challenge? What was that challenge and how did you respond to it?
So something very recent was the product pitch. So we had a group of 4 people and I was the team leader. One of the teammates didn't really pull their weight, so I had to organize the 2 other members to pretty much fill in for that work. So we pretty much split up the work 30-30 and we were able to complete that portion of the task. Or 30-30-30.
Coleman, can you tell me about a manager that you found it hard to work with, and what did you do to maintain a positive relationship with that person?
Yeah, I had one manager that was a little hard to work with because he was a really hands-off manager, so he just let me do whatever I want, and I really like structure, so it was a really hard time for me to do the task at hand without him necessarily assigning me work. So it was really hard to find work for myself to do and not slack off. One of the things that I did was documenting things I did. So if he asked me, what did you do today, I would have an answer. That's just something I had to do in case he just followed up with me randomly one day. So there's projects that I've done.
What helped you hold yourself accountable in making sure that you were actually, completing projects with a manager who's a little bit more distant?
I think just recording everything was just really helpful. Just seeing I didn't really do anything that one calendar date really showed how productive I was that day. There are times where, specifically in IT, there's no problems to resolve. So you have to find these preventative measures so things don't happen in the future.
Do you think it's more important to lead or to compromise, and why?
Yeah, I think it depends what role you're in specifically, and how much influence you have at the moment. But from a intern perspective, I would say majority of the time, probably compromise. But as my ranking goes up higher, leadership. Because there must be things I don't understand in order for those rules to be set there.
Could you tell me about a time that you felt like you were going to fail something, and that you worked hard to succeed in?
I have to fall back to this job again. When I first applied, it was my first 24/7 support role, and I had 2 phones in my pocket, and it was really hard to just pick up calls in the morning at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning, and I just had to figure out ways to make sure the phones were right next to my ears so I could pick it up then and there. Because before this job, I wasn't like a phone person, I was more of a texter. And I just preferred to drop people's calls instead of picking it up. But that role forced me to be always aware if my phone has signal, if I have any missed emails, and just pretty much respond right away. That was the biggest hurdle I had to jump over.
So I want you to imagine that you work at a tech company and your manager has just asked you to complete a high-profile project, meaning that executives will see the finished product of your work. You have no idea where to start, and you didn't learn the skills that you need to complete the project a year up. How are you going to proceed?
Depending on the project, I would most likely see if there's some models or something similar is online. So if it's some Excel model, maybe I could find something similar online of a similar project and maybe emulate that. Or go through the company database to see if this report or project has been done before, and then also model off that. I would just use the escalation method, just do my self-research. If I can't move on from there, possibly ask a peer or a manager.
Great. Let's do one more before the tech demo.
Cool. Could you identify your greatest strength in the workplace as well as what you believe is your biggest growth area?
My biggest strength is probably my ability to collaborate with people. Having that wide range of communication skills, being able to speak with non-proficient English speakers to very tech-savvy people is probably the biggest asset I have. As far as growth areas, it would probably be taking on too many projects at once and just being a yes man. Maybe just being able to say no to some projects would probably be able to increase the quality of work.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the video for